Hey, if you're thinking, I barely have time to write, let alone start a podcast, I got you. My Start Your Author podcast checklist helps busy writers like you start a podcast without sacrificing your writing time. No more guessing or Googling. Starting is actually the easiest part of podcasting, and with this step-by-step checklist, you can fit it in over the next 6 weeks or even next weekend. Stop letting uncertainty hold you back. Grab your free checklist at the link below and get on your way to serving your target readers today. Welcome to Book Marketing Mania. I'm your host, Kim, and I'm so thrilled you're here to learn how to reach and serve your readers as a podcast host and guest. Are you thinking, I don't have time to add one more thing to my plate, like start a podcast? Or if you already host one, are you thinking, podcasting takes so much time, I got to stop my podcast? Oh goodness, you are not alone. The struggle is real. But what I've been finding when working with author podcasters, and admittedly myself, is when you look at where your time is going, you realize you're spending hours on social media content that admittedly doesn't do you any good. Or you spend long hours interviewing other authors about their books, and then you release these really long interview episodes that your listeners don't have time to even finish anyway. And it's not just about the amount of time. It can also be the wrong timing. As a podcast guest, you often wear yourself out trying to fit all your podcast guesting in around your launch day to meet that goal of book sales within a certain time. And then you give up when you don't see it happening. Or maybe you don't even get started guesting because you're like, I got to wait until my book publishes to even get started. But I want you to go get them, GETM, with podcasting this year with the right goals, episodes, time, and money. So in the past 2 episodes, we talked about your goals and your episode content. Now let's talk about the right time or timing to podcast to reach and serve your readers. So of the 4 goals we've been talking about as a host and guest, content to attract and nurture, growing your email list, building relationships for collaborations, and selling books. The only one that has a unique timing is, of course, book sales. You can't measure book sales until your book is for sale, right? But I do want to encourage you to not just sell your book around your launch date, but long after that. And really long before that, if you're with me on Marketing Starts right when God lays that message on your heart. And a great resource that talks about your book launch and the longevity of it is the book published by Chandler Bolt, because he talks about having a 1-year launch, and podcasting, especially a podcast tour, is a big part of that. And I will link to Chandler's book in the show notes. Now let's talk about the time and timing of the other 3 goals, because as a host, you have the most flexibility. So if you're creating content to attract and nurture readers, or you're growing your email list, or you're building relationships, I want you to think about the time of your episode length. How long does your episode need to be to get your point across for your listeners? Sometimes our episodes get a little carried away. Gosh, I am so guilty of that. And they could easily be split up into 2 separate episodes that saves us more time, and it helps our listeners out with their busy day as well. And it might be, the timing of your episodes. How often do listeners need to hear from you to meet those goals? Is it weekly? Is it biweekly? Is it monthly? Is it seasonally? You don't want your podcast to become a marketing black hole that takes up all your writing time, right? So look ahead at your calendar, and maybe you see some writing or editing deadlines, and you might want to batch ahead and get your episodes done early, or change up your episode frequency. So say like you're doing weekly and you want to back off and just do every 2 weeks, or maybe once a month. And vice versa. Say, when your pre-orders start, you may want to increase the timing and frequency of your episodes because you want a chance for listeners to hear it more than once. I know on my journey, I've changed my frequency several times, but I always tell you, the listeners, and I want you to do the same for yours too. Back on episode 100, I will link it in the show notes. I received several incredible tips from my podcasting friends that related to time when it comes to hosting a podcast. So be sure to check that out. Now, as a podcast guest, remember what we talked about back on episode 152 when we started this series? You can start marketing your message as soon as God lays it on your heart. You don't have to wait until your book is in hand to let somebody know you can help them. And in addition to the message you're writing about, don't be afraid to pitch a timely topic as a guest. Even if it has nothing to do with your book or the one you're writing, it's all about service over selling. And that can really go a long way with you just creating content again, or building relationships, or perhaps building your email list. And don't forget, podcasting is a long game. And as a guest, we're not in charge of the release date of our interview. But pro tip, just between us, I have found that if you're a fellow podcast host with topics that can serve each other's audience as well, a guest swap will likely move you to the front of the line on somebody else's show. Just saying, another reason you might want to consider hosting your own podcast. And if you want to hear more about pitching podcasts as a first-time author, be sure to tune in to episode 68 with Rebecca George. It was an amazing conversation. So remember last episode, you looked at the episode topics you're talking about to meet your podcasting goals. And now look at the time and timing for meeting those goals. And if you need some help auditing how you're spending your time so you can find more time to put towards your podcast as a host or guest, be sure to listen to episode 74 with my guest, Alyssa Figgins. I'll link it in the show notes too. So stay tuned as we continue the series on how to go get them with podcasting this year with the right goals, episodes, time, and money. In the next episode, the last one of this series, we're going to talk about the money that you are spending, or perhaps money is what is holding you back from podcasting as a host or guest. And we don't want that to be a roadblock because your readers and listeners need to hear your God-given message now. And speaking of, shout out to Donna, who left a review saying, "This podcast is right up my alley. As an author, I'm always looking for more ways to market my book and gain visibility. Thanks for your wisdom, Kim." And thank you, Donna. And if Book Marketing Mania is bringing you value as an author, even before your book is published, I'd be so grateful if you too left a review because your feedback means the world to me. Thanks for tuning in today. And as always, I'll be there for you to help you reach and serve your readers one podcast at a time. See you next episode.